Nowadays, there are so many people learning languages around the world. Actually, according to BBC, more than half of people around the world speak at least two languages. According to a website called Ethnologue, Language of the World, among the three most spoken languages, we can find Chinese, Spanish, and English.
Even though English is not the most spoken language around the world, it is the most widespread of all. In 2015, out of the 195 countries of the world, 67 nations have English as the primary language of official status. Plus, there are also 27 countries where English is spoken as a secondary official language, as stated by St. George International, the language specialists. There are several reasons why a person develops an interest in adding other additional languages to the mother tongue. But learning a second language doesn't necessarily implicate that there is a desire to do so. Some people do it just because of obligation or necessity. For example, some may do it because it's a requirement for getting a job position. Some children and teenagers because it is a compulsory subject at school, and also to pass certain tests that are usually required to enter a school or a country, or simply because they enjoy the experience as an intellectual exercise for the mind. And there are some contexts in which the learner has an intrinsic desire to learn. And here we have, for example, people who are interested in learning about other countries and cultures, people who want to travel and be able to communicate with others, or people who want to become teachers of the language.
Without considering why somebody is choosing to learn or study a second language, there is an important element that may or may not be taken into consideration, and that is the culture behind that language. One could think that learning a language does not necessarily mean learning its culture, but it can be taught implicitly and explicitly. Culture is presented implicitly in a language through many aspects: the use of certain words, descriptions, or the existence or the non-existence of certain words in different languages. Language can also tell us how culture perceives proximity and relationships between people, their social habits, their beliefs, and values. Language and culture go together, although there are times when we think the opposite, and times when we are explicitly exposed to the teaching of a culture. For example, in schools teaching material,
Is the culture of a language present when learning that language? Well, according to Yang, in simple words, culture and language are inseparable. Wei says language without culture is unthinkable. So is human culture without language. A particular language is the mirror of a particular culture. Brown, a language is part of a culture, and a culture is part of a language. The two are quite interrelated. One cannot separate the two without losing the significance of either language or culture. Gao says the interdependence of language learning and cultural learning is so evident that one can conclude that language learning is a cultural learning, and consequently, language teaching is a cultural teaching. Therefore, yes, culture is inescapable and intrinsic when learning a language.
Up to these days, English taught institutionally has been only seen from the point of view of two of the most powerful English-speaking countries, which are the USA and the UK. A clear example of this is that the British accent is considered as the preferred one because of the false belief that it has higher quality than other accents. Another example is the overshared American symbols and characters. So the cultural focus is narrowed. But today's reality is showing us how English is becoming the global language. Therefore, it is neither exclusive of the USA nor the UK. There are actually many other countries that speak it. English seems to be a thread that unifies not only several people, but also different cultures. Every time the needle goes spreading English and its culture, it gets mixed with the proper native one. For instance, after many decades, India created what is known as Indian English, where you can find plenty of variations in accents and pronunciations of English, which are as acceptable as the traditional ones. Actually, idiomatic forms derived from Indian literary languages and vernaculars have been absorbed into Indian English. Having said that, it is not enough to know about the turkey that people eat in Thanksgiving Day in the USA, or the types of tea that you can find in the UK. We should also include all those places that have internalized English as their language, since they are now part of the English culture. English language allows us to know the cultural differences among nations that share the same language.